The fastest way to stay broke is to believe money is something you can only get after you finally feel safe. The painful truth is that most people never get safe, because the rules they follow keep them in a permanent waiting room, and the system is designed to profit while you wait. This is not financial advice. This is financial education, the kind that hurts because it explains what you have been doing wrong and who benefits from it. In 2026, you are being squeezed from three directions at once. Your job is being automated faster than you were told. Your housing costs have disconnected from your paycheck. And inflation may be down on paper, but your real purchasing power still hasn't returned to the life you remember. What you are going to hear today is a hard model for thinking about money using a simple sequence of four actions: borrowing, earning, spending, and saving. Not the way most people learn it in life, with slogans and work hard posters, the way the wealthy actually run it. And the difference is not moral, it is mechanical, it is order, it is timing, it is psychology wired into behavior. Now listen closely. There are two common financial mental programs you will recognize immediately. One program treats borrowing as the last resort, something shameful you avoid at all costs. Then you try to earn, then you save, then you spend whatever is left. The other program starts with borrowing or capital access first, then spending to launch something that can earn, then earning to repay and grow, and saving becomes a tool inside that cycle, not the whole point of life. And here is the part nobody says out loud. Your money behavior is not just a set of habits, it is a belief about scarcity. If you truly believe money is scarce, you will act like a person who can never fully relax. You will hesitate, you will underinvest, you will avoid risks even when the risk is exactly what creates upside. You will treat opportunity like a trap. When your inner world runs on scarcity, your outer world runs on survival. And in 2026, survival is expensive. Before we get to the ugly mechanics, I want you to picture a person I have met in every major city in the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia. They are not lazy, they are not stupid, they are just trapped inside the wrong script. Picture a 32-year-old nurse named David. He works nights. He pays rent on time. He has a small emergency fund. He tells himself he is doing everything right. He even has a retirement account. And when he watches people online talk about passive income, he feels a familiar panic because it sounds like a different species of life. Then his car breaks down in February 2026. He needs $3,000. He doesn't have it. He calls his credit card company, and his monthly payment becomes a permanent tax on his future. Later, when rates changed and his loan terms got worse, he tries to refinance and realizes his credit score is already damaged from doing what the system taught him to do: delay decisions until you can no longer afford them. David is not failing because he is weak. He is failing because he is playing the wrong game with the wrong rules, and the scoreboard is hidden. Now let's name the hidden rule. Most people were taught money is earned first, then saved, then spent responsibly, and borrowing is for the desperate. That advice feels safe. It also quietly blocks them from building leverage. Leverage is not a swear word. Leverage is how capital scales. In 2026, the people who control leverage control the economy, and the rest of you compete for scraps. So why does order matter so much? Because order determines what you do when you are short on cash. If you fear borrowing, you wait. Waiting kills momentum, and momentum is one of the only things you can't negotiate after your rent goes up again. The next time you hear someone say, "just save more," ask a different question. Save more for what? For retirement that is delayed again? For a home that is pricing itself out of wages? For an inflation tail that quietly steals the value of every paycheck you earn? You might think this is just personal psychology. It is not. This is how the Federal Reserve's interest rate policies filter into normal lives. When the central bank raises rates, borrowing costs rise. Credit becomes a tighter leash. And if your financial strategy is built around avoiding debt, you might feel like you are protected. But you are not protected. You are just less capable of acting. You are less capable of investing. You are less capable of taking the kind of opportunities that require upfront capital. While you are avoiding debt, institutions are doing the opposite. They borrow when they can, they buy assets when they can, and they structure risk in ways you were never taught. That brings us to the first dark truth. The rich mindset is not a personality trait. It is an access strategy. In 2026, access to capital has become the real dividing line between people who build wealth and people who build resumes. And access is not mainly about intelligence. It is about belief, networks, and whether you treat money as a tool that should move or a treasure that must be guarded. There is a story that repeats itself across cultures. I met an older man once, the kind of person who speaks like the world is stable and the ladder is fair. He told me startup dreams are for fantasy writers. He said people like him spent 30 years working for a company, earned raises, bought 2 houses and a car, and that was the proof that hard work equals security. Then I asked the question that always makes people uncomfortable. If the recipe works so well, why didn't he use that security to start something of his own? Why was he content to exchange his time for wages for decades instead of building an ownership stake? He said he had to support his family. If the venture failed, what then? And that is where the trap shows itself. He wasn't afraid of failure. He was afraid of losing the money he already had, but he also assumed he would never be able to replace it. That assumption is scarcity. It is fear dressed as responsibility. Now compare that with a different kind of logic you also see, often in immigrant communities and entrepreneur-heavy networks. If your family and friends normalize business creation, borrowing becomes a tool instead of a shame. You hear equity and cash flow like other people hear weather. You see other people take risk, survive it, learn, and come back. Your brain stops treating opportunity like a miracle. That is why people sometimes wonder why some communities seem disproportionately entrepreneurial. The boring answer is networks. The real answer is that environment trains belief. When you grow up watching people run businesses, you stop thinking of entrepreneurship as a distant fantasy. Relationships are an asset class, not in a cheesy way, in a brutally practical way. In finance, information and trust move faster than money. If you can reach someone who knows how to evaluate risk, you can borrow with better terms or raise money with fewer mistakes. If you can't reach anyone, you will borrow on worse terms or not at all. Here is the cliffhanger part. Even if you personally build the right mindset, you still have to survive the timing gap in 2026 because the economy is not waiting for your personal development. Let me connect this to housing, because housing is where belief becomes pain. In the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia, housing has detached from wages in a way that feels permanent. Many working adults now spend a larger share of income on rent or mortgage payments than they did in 2019. Some cities have seen rent increases that outpaced wage growth for years, and when you are renting, you are paying someone else's leverage. The landlord borrows to buy the property or already owns it. You pay the bill and subsidize the asset while interest rates and insurance costs threaten their costs and your stability at the same time. Then climate-driven disruptions enter the chat. Insurance markets are collapsing in some regions. Premiums rise or coverage disappears. People relocate for that reason alone. Moving costs are not small. They are thousands. They are weeks of stress, and they hit people who are already living close to the edge. So when you hear someone say, just save, remember this. Saving is not just about cutting expenses. It is about whether your spending is structurally trapped. If rent rises regardless of your discipline, saving becomes a treadmill. Now the second dark truth, your fear of borrowing is often not financial risk management. It is emotional risk avoidance. When most people think about borrowing, they imagine a bank statement with interest rates like traps, or they imagine the shame of telling friends they need money. They imagine the worst headline, default, bankruptcy, ruined reputation, and that fear is not irrational. In a world where health costs can destroy families overnight, where layoffs happen without warning, where global debt is above $300 trillion and rising, getting into the wrong kind of debt can indeed be fatal. But the wealthy do not avoid debt. They structure it. They use it to buy assets that produce cash flow. They borrow against income-producing property, not against their ego. They plan for downside, and they also understand something most people never learn until it is too late. The cost of waiting is also a cost. Here is a micro story to make it real. A friend of mine worked at a small company in 2024 that offered logistics software. He said he wanted to build his own product. He had ambition, but no capital. He tried to save while working. By late 2025, he had savings, but the savings were too small to create a real launch. He was forced to borrow from friends, and the relationships turned cold. Every month became awkward. Every repayment became a negotiation. He called it temporary until the stress made him quit. That is how borrowing anxiety destroys not only finances but social trust. The wealthy handle this differently. They treat borrowing as a contract, not a friendship problem. They seek institutions when the size matters. They seek investors when the risk can be allocated. They do not confuse capital with emotional rescue. One of the cleanest examples of this is the logic behind startup stories. Many entrepreneurs were not rich when they began. They borrowed, they raised, they used whatever access was available, and they built the earning engine afterward. Investors are not donating money because they admire your vulnerability. Investors finance belief in your future ability to generate returns. This is the same reason why stock markets often reward narratives before results. People sometimes ask, how can a company be valued highly when it is not profitable? The uncomfortable answer is that pricing reflects expected future growth and expected future ability to earn. Confidence matters. Credibility matters. Momentum matters. You can see this in tech. There were periods when the market valued companies far beyond their current profits because investors believed the future was imminent. And when the future arrived, sometimes those bets paid off, sometimes they didn't. But the mechanism is consistent. Capital flows when someone believes cash flow is coming. So here is the pattern interrupt. Your personal belief may be controlling your access to capital more than your resume does. If you believe you are not the kind of person who can borrow responsibly, you will never build the borrowing literacy that creates leverage. And if you never borrow when conditions are favorable, you miss the window when assets are cheap relative to future income, or when markets are offering opportunities before they reprice. Now let's escalate from belief to action, because belief without action is just suffering with better vocabulary. Third dark truth: saving alone will not create financial freedom if the real problem is income and leverage. In 2026, most financial content online pushes the same script: cut expenses, save for 10 years, invest, and eventually you will be able to retire. It sounds responsible. It also ignores modern costs: medical shocks, child costs, elder care, rent cycles, insurance risk from climate events, and the reality that wages often lag asset prices. Yes, saving matters. I am not going to pretend budgets don't matter. But if the proportion of your income consumed by housing and insurance rises year after year, your ability to save becomes a rounding error. You can be extremely disciplined and still lose. A person saving aggressively in a high-rent city can still feel poorer each year if their salary growth is less than the cost growth of their essentials. Inflation does not only change prices, it changes your capacity. Real purchasing power matters, and real purchasing power has not returned to 2019 levels for many households even after headline inflation eased in some periods. And you can see why. Central bank rate cycles influence not only credit cards and mortgages, but also asset valuations. When rates are low, asset prices can rise, and when they rise, financing costs can squeeze consumers while institutions refinance and buy selectively. The result is wealth concentration accelerating. The top tier has more assets, better credit, and better access to hedging. Everyone else gets an invoice. So if you want freedom, you need a strategy that increases income more aggressively than expenses. Not just with a side hustle that disappears after one burnout, with real leverage and a cash flow engine. That could mean starting a business, building a product, negotiating for equity, or moving into income streams that compound. Now pause. We are still missing the most brutal piece. Fourth dark truth: AI and employment disruption means the learn-to-code advice from the past is outdated, and you are already late if you waited for training to save you. In 2026, AI is not a distant threat. It is a substitute in many roles that used to be stable: customer support, basic design, drafting, some programming tasks, even certain analytic workflows. AI does not need to fire you in a dramatic scene. It simply makes your role cheaper to replace, and businesses restructure around cost. That is why the debate about a useless class has become more than online rage. If automation removes the middle tier, the economy doesn't become kinder, it becomes more polarized, and the training advice you were given often assumed a world where skills stay scarce. AI makes certain skills less scarce. It does not make entrepreneurship less possible, but it does change the kinds of skills that are profitable to own. So what can you own if AI commoditizes many tasks? Ownership of distribution, ownership of a narrative, ownership of a problem-solving relationship, ownership of a channel that brings demand. In other words, you need to build into areas where AI can assist but not fully replace the human business role. This is where content and personal media fits, but not the way people sell it online. Most people think self-media is posting. That is not a business. Posting is free. Business is conversion. Business is audience, trust, and monetization. In 2026, many people with followings earn close to nothing. The creator economy illusion is everywhere. You see luxury lifestyles in short clips, and you assume it is common. It isn't. Most accounts generate minimal revenue. The algorithms promote content, but monetization depends on advertiser demand, viewer demographics, and platform incentives. You can build an audience and still earn zero if your niche isn't tied to money. And even if you monetize, AI can generate similar content faster than you can. So the advantage shifts toward people who can create differentiated value, who can curate, who can aggregate, who can become a trusted operator in a specific domain. This is why the find a stable job and invest for 10 years plan is fragile in 2026. Stability is being renegotiated by technology. And if technology is renegotiating your job, it is also renegotiating your timeline. The window to change is now, not after you finally feel secure. Now you deserve a clear mechanism, not motivation. Remember the four-step model: borrowing, earning, spending, saving. If you treat it like a ritual, you will miss the point. The point is that the wealthy typically use borrowing and spending earlier to acquire assets or launch ventures, then use earning to repay and grow, and then they